But don't do that. Do it like, sorry.
Okay, roll it. After 3 and 4, take 1.
Right, it comes. And action! It's a question of this man is trying to kill me, I am trying to kill him. And therefore all the action that occurs within that scene is viewed through that idea. And if someone comes screaming at you with a sword, then you get out of the way. I'd run, I would. But in the character, you have to defend yourself. And so you have to be terribly physical, because that's what you would be, and that's what they would be as well. They would have been enormously physical people, very shrewd fighters. There's no rules in fighting. I know this parry nonsense, which can be terribly cod. But you can't go over the top. You have to temper it, because you don't want to offend young people, for example, who might be watching. Or, I mean, I don't particularly like seeing people's guts over tables when I'm having my dinner, just to disinfect it.
Judy Trott is a girl that I think is going to be a very big star. She's got, I think, a Renaissance beauty. She's not a modern young lady in a lot of ways, although she is modern. Her appearance, her approach, her composure is something that fits perfectly into the period. And what we're doing with the Maid Marian character, as you know, is that we're getting her involved in the forest. She's going to be living with Robin in the forest. They are lovers, although we never see anything of that description, but it is assumed that they are lovers. She joins in with the men, the merry men, and gets involved in their activities, and she's a very active Maid Marian.
Judy Trott, who plays Maid Marian, again, and this is in the script, you know, if it ain't on the page, it ain't on the stage, as they say. In the script, she's we decided to make a much more positive figure rather than the rather demure, submissive, typical Maid Marian. She's quite a spirited lady. She's a bit of a snob. She turns out to be a bit of a snob. And then she sort of fights against the Normans and these rather awful guardians that have taken her in hand, purely to get their land and wealth and so on. And then she turns towards, she's rather attracted to the outlaws and, of course, to Robin Hood. And when she joins the band, she sort of melts off into the forest with, she becomes one of the lads. So one of the qualities we look for in Judy, who's got a tremendous range of being very, very female and vulnerable, and at the same time sort of sparking through with a great spirit and so on. And I think that's important as well, because we've got very few women. Never get any films with women in, they're always sort of macho. There's only one woman in it, and it's important that, you know, women should identify with it. It's not all sort of a male show, you know, with all the sort of male figures being terribly macho up front with protecting this poor little woman. I mean, she's got a lot to say for her and a lot physically to do later on, which is good.
I like the idea of all the running around, or the physical side of, you know, being part of the band. I'm looking forward to it, because I think that's the way it's got to be. You know, she's part of the gang, and any riding, fencing, or archery would be great. I love it.
You savage. Is murder the only thing that can excite you? Oh, how many deaths, how many to satisfy your devil? You're terrified of him, aren't you, Simon? You're not his servant. You're his victim.
Prepare her for the Lord as you.
She's quite mature in her thinking, you know, although we're playing at her about 17 or 18, she's very together as a person. And did I say she was self-assured? I think she's a very self-assured person. To get sympathy and for people to understand them, you've got to be able to associate with them. And it's very hard to associate with somebody that's is a totally different way of thinking, say like 400 years ago, 500 years ago.
Prisoner 30, take 1.
Why close yourself up in Kirklees?
There you'll learn nothing. Here, you'll learn everything. The final mystery.
You're terrified of him, aren't you, Simon? You're not his servant. You're his victim.
Hey, Tony.
Bill, I shouldn't pack up till the take, actually. Yeah? Let that thick, Martin, please.
Right, this brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, here we go.
And you start on action, Tony, it's dialogue.
Yeah?
Okay, and action.
People are going to compare, obviously, this Robin Hood to all the other Robin Hoods which have happened. And in that sense, it has to be totally different, I think. There's no point copying Errol Flynn or Richard Green or Douglas Fairbanks and all that lot. So you have to... I think one of the biggest differences is the age difference. We're all much younger than they were when they did the role. And that brings to it a huge amount of vitality, which was not there, I don't think, in the other productions. And it's also not as glamorous as the Hollywood ones are. It's sort of true to life. And it's amazing, actually, on just simply the difference in energy level, which young actors can give simply because they don't mind throwing themselves about at 10 o'clock in the morning, how it comes off from the screen.
In those sort of swashbuckling days, they got away with an awful lot. I think you get away with an awful lot in black and white as well. If you remember things like the great sea battles in Seahawk and so on, I mean, you couldn't do them today in colour. You couldn't afford the extras for a start, but I think that things have slicked up a lot today, and that's what we're trying to do on this programme, you know, is to in this picture, is to introduce sort of modern effects, modern stunt arranging and choreography and so on. But of course you can't have people going around kicking guys in places where it hurts. You've got to be very careful, actually, in a lot of the fight sequences that we do sort of, in a sense, stick to what will be accepted as period, without going over the top on blood and so on. You know, I mean, this is action rather than violence. You know, I mean, to me, it's always a film anyway. But we don't have any sort of lingering shots on people being knifed, or, I mean, goodness knows how many Normans various people have killed. But you never see any blood or anything. It's just good in that way, it's rather old-fashioned rather than modern. We've stuck to the sort of the old cowboys and Indians action, you know, with the Indians being shot off horses and so on. I think that's what the public want to see. I think they do.
If we're fighting, right, and you've taken the other way around, like, you've just taken me over. Yeah. So now, as I come round, I'm doing that. Yeah. You've got to go back.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think
I'll get closer. I'll just delay it.
I mean, it's down to you to keep it flat.
The other thing about the kind of production we're doing is that it's not a triple X movie, so when we show people stabbing each other, there's not going to be 17 litres of Kensington gore throwing around the place. Again, part of the beauty of film is that it has an amazing capacity to liberate the imagination, which actually is much more powerful, I think, than showing blood. And you don't have to... You can just demonstrate it and get a much... arguably a better effect.
When we first started to think about Robin Hood, making Robin Hood again, there were 5 separate productions being lined up of Robin Hood, including a Mel Brooks feature film, which sadly had the late and marvellous comedian Marty Feldman playing Will Scarlet. But since we've continued, we've lasted the field, we are making the Robin Hood, as far as we're concerned, for the 80s. It is inhibiting in a lot of ways. A lot of people say not again, but I think when people see Michael Praed and Judy Trott and wonderful cast we've got, they will enjoy it enormously.
When you get up to those positions, what I want to try and do is sort of capture you half.
Ian Sharp, for me, is the most important element in the production. What he's bringing for us is his work on the professionals and Minder and Who Dares Wins, the feature film, has showed me very much he's a tremendous man of action. He's got tremendous precision. His directing is very precise. He has an enormous amount of flair, and his action work is, I think, second to none in the country. And I think he's going to be a very, very big feature film director. And we were very lucky to get him for this, because he'd been offered a lot of feature films and he wanted to do this. We sent him the first script and he said, yes, I'll do it. And he's doing all the episodes, which is absolutely marvellous.
Fire will consume you!
Now, you've got to see in your expression, actually, for that physically and facially. You're really struggling against all this crap, you know, and all this wind. You know, you're trying to force the string back. Well, I think there are a lot of parallels, actually, particularly in this country, you know, sort of class-divided society, the peasants revolt, young terrorist leader, acceptable sort of terrorism, though, you know, because they were treated so badly. And I think there are a lot of parallels with, I mean, just thinking about sort of land ownership and so on, of a much more sordid way in those days, you know, a feudal society, more sort of mafioso ownership of the land.
All right. Effects, action. Action! Break your bow! Throw away your arrows! They have no power over the servant of the Lord as you. Why hesitate? Where's your strength? Hand chose well. Is your aim true? Fire will consume you! Get it there, please.
Actually, the hardest thing is arrows. I mean, it's easy with bullets because you can have nice sort of blood hits on people, and people just fire off, you get a blast from the gun, it's nice and easy. In comparison, I think the other thing is with car chases and so on, and cars and helicopters, they usually sort of work, you can't right to the mark, you know, but with horses you've got to hang about until they train them up properly, get them into the right positions and so on. So actually they've been very good, I must say. The organisation of the horses and so on has been excellent. It's just more time consuming really, because they refuse to at the moment. I mean, I speak to the horses every night, but it doesn't seem to be having much effect.
Gel those up with them proper, they go rather well.
Is your aim true? Fire will consume you.
Richard Carpenter is who I've worked with now for nearly 12 years, from Black Beauty days, and he had just then created and written a marvellous series called Catweasel, which I'm sure you remember. Richard has, when we first decided to do Robin Hood again, he went away, got enormously excited, and came up with this entirely new concept. I think he's the best writer in this genre in the world, frankly, and I know that may sound rather an overstatement, but he's the man behind this, really. It's that vision, that initial vision that he gives us, which is makes this series and the things we've done in the past that little bit different from the normal family viewing, if you see.
Most Robin Hoods, certainly on the screen, that we've had up to now, have been men of action, very sure of themselves, very definite and simple in their characters. I wanted to create a fairly complex Robin Hood, who had to question his actions sometimes, who sometimes made mistakes, who found the act of killing, for instance, repellent, but sometimes necessary, because he lived in an age where killing was an everyday occurrence. But you've got to somehow make this acceptable to a modern audience. So I made my Robin rather loath to kill. He finds it very hard. Will Scarlett, on the other hand, has no such scruples. I wanted to show the other side of the coin as well.
Well, it's much better if, in fact, you announce him than some servant.
Some other servant.
Because he's the guy that's
I quite agree with that. It gives me an extra line as well.
Because he's the guy that sets you up anyway
yes.
in the scene, so that'll work.
Because he knows that I'm going to drag Robin Marion out of the nunnery.
That's right. That's fine. Great. Very flexible.
My own role is of a present-day balladeer. And if there'd been no written stories of Robin Hood, it would be rather like that party game where you all sit in a circle and somebody whispers a sentence into somebody's ear and they whisper what they thought they heard to the next person, and so on it goes round and comes out the other end and it's a completely different sentence. I'm not suggesting that an exact parallel, but that because each person who told that story must have added bits, I'm adding my bit. And I see myself very much as a popular balladeer of today, if you like, with a much bigger audience than they had. They had to walk all over the country telling their story. I've only got to tell it once.